admiration I actually have for China. Because their basic dictatorship.
China marks the 31st anniversary of the massacre in Tiananmen Square with yet another crackdown on democratic rights. This time, they're coming down hard on Hong Kong with another censorship law, and they're limiting Hong Kongers' attempts to honor the Chinese freedom fighters of 1989. Now, by the end of May 1989, over 1 million protesters had converged on China's Tiananmen Square to seize that moment in time to push for democracy and freedom. They were there hoping finally for changes after the death of former communist leader Hu Yaobang. These student-led protests were about government corruption, lack of transparency, and freedom of speech. They were about human rights. And the protests embarrassed China when they disrupted a visit by Soviet leader Gorbachev. And so the People's Liberation Army tanks came. And we've all seen the photo of the so-called tank man, 2 grocery bags in hand with an outstretched arm to stop the tanks as they rolled in. And he did for a time, until that unknown man was whisked away, possibly imprisoned for life or executed. His name has never been confirmed. But the Sunday Express in the UK reported at the time he could have been a 19-year-old student named Wang Weilin. He slowed the crackdown, but he didn't stop it. Hundreds, maybe thousands of protesters were killed over the course of 2 days, June 4th and June 5th, 1989. China has never once been clear with the death toll when the CCP forces opened fire on the crowd, but over 10,000 were arrested. And here's the thing about Tank Man and his role in one of the most iconic images of the 20th century. Most people in China have never seen that photo or have ever heard of him because of strict communist state censorship. And to mark this bloody occasion, China is again cracking down on free speech, this time in Hong Kong, as they fight for freedom from China. First, the Chinese state is doing its best to stop the supposedly semi-autonomous city of Hong Kong from honoring the freedom fighters in Tiananmen Square. Here is the news from The Guardian. Police had, for the first time in 3 decades, banned the annual candlelight vigil in Victoria Park, citing the coronavirus pandemic. Yeah, right. Unlike past years, no organized ceremony was allowed on Thursday as police refused to give activists a permit. Police loud-hailers repeatedly played a message warning people against participating in unapproved gatherings, although only small groups of police stood guard outside the park and did not stop people from entering. Mourners, young and old, held candlelights and chanted slogans. Unlike past years when they mostly called for the vindication of the 1989 movement, many were shouting slogans calling for independence from China, such as Hong Kong independence, only way, Hong Kong, build our own nation, and free Hong Kong democracy now. Some burst into choruses of the unofficial anthem of the anti-government protests, Glory to Hong Kong. What happened in Tiananmen Square showed the true nature of the Communist Party, said Lawrence, a 25-year-old retailer who said he would not be intimidated by the national security laws. Instead of being silenced, I'd rather sacrifice myself for freedom. If we have no freedom, it makes no difference whether you're in jail or not. But that's not all. This week, China also imposed a law on Hong Kong to restrict speech and expression that may be critical of the Chinese government. Look at this from Time magazine. Hong Kong's legislature approved a contentious bill Thursday that makes it illegal to insult the Chinese national anthem. The legislation was approved after pro-democracy opposition lawmakers tried to disrupt the vote. The bill was passed with 41 lawmakers voting for it and just 1 voting against. Most of the pro-democracy lawmakers boycotted the vote out of protest. The pro-democracy camp sees the anthem bill as an infringement of freedom of expression and the greater rights that residents of the semi-autonomous city have compared to mainland China. The pro-Beijing majority said the law was necessary for Hong Kong citizens to show appropriate respect for the anthem. Those found guilty of intentionally abusing the March of the Volunteers anthem face up to 3 years in prison and a fine of up to 50,000 Hong Kong dollars. The legislative debate was earlier suspended after pro-democracy lawmakers staged a protest, with one dropping a pot of pungent liquid in the chamber, raising a sign that said, "A murderous regime stinks for 10,000 years." Lawmaker Ray Chen walked to the front with the pot hidden inside a Chinese paper lantern. When security guards tried to stop him, he dropped the lantern and the pot and was ejected from the meeting. Another lawmaker who accompanied him was also ejected. 31 years after the Tiananmen Square massacre, a new generation is fighting for freedom from China, and they are being systematically silenced as the Western world, as the Canadian government largely ignores their existential fight. There's a real reason they fly the American flag at the freedom protests in Hong Kong. Trump stands up to China, and Trudeau, well, this is him.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship.
Sorry, Trudeau, there is nothing to admire about the evil, censorious, murderous CCP regime. And glory to Hong Kong. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. Chinese telecom giant Huawei is the digital surveillance arm of the Chinese Communist government. It has no business doing business in Canada, and that's why we want the government to ban Huawei from our networks. To sign our petition, please go to banhuawei.com.